Neville Park had never expected his diplomatic training to land him on a stage that looked like the unholy union of a daytime talk show and an alien coronation. Yet there he was, standing under a canopy of neon strobe lights inside an immense amphitheater on the capital planet of the Xerian Dominion. The crowd was enormous. Thousands of alien dignitaries, bureaucrats, and curious onlookers from across the galaxy gathered to watch the latest installment of the so-called cultural exchange program. On paper, it was billed as an interstellar peace pageant. Each species would send a representative to demonstrate unity. In truth, it was a forced marriage show where the winner would be betrothed to a royal scion of House Xerian. Neville, as the lucky Terran contestant, would only learn about that final twist minutes before stepping into the spotlight. He was told, of course, that this was a chance for Earth to show its best self. Nobody had mentioned vows. Nobody had mentioned a throne shaped like a predatory sea creature. And absolutely nobody had warned him about the potential meltdown from both sides of his family, especially if that wedding threat turned real. Yet here he was, adjusting the collar of his formal uniform, doing his best not to sneeze from the swirling rose-scented incense that permeated the arena. He had a particular reason to worry about sneezing. He was terribly allergic to zealot coriander, an alien herb that smelled eerily like Earth cilantro on steroids. The swirling incense had suspicious undertones of something green and pungent, which made his eyes water. He cleared his throat, blinking under the glare of overhead spotlights, and tried not to look too flustered by the fact that his seat on stage was not a normal chair, but a high-tech contraption rumored to be carbon-infused memory foam. It looked glossy and regal, almost like a throne carved out of living coral. The problem was it seemed to breathe. When he put his hand on the armrest, the surface hissed gently, as if deciding whether to devour him. The master of ceremonies, an AI with a strangely cheery voice modulated to sound like someone's overenthusiastic grandmother, announced him as Cadet Neville Park of Earth, specialist in interplanetary linguistics and proud Terran ambassador. To underscore the pomp, the AI's voice rose in pitch. Please welcome our star participant who shall help us strengthen the bonds of love across the cosmos. Neville forced a diplomatic smile. He'd been through multiple training scenarios about making first contact, bridging cultural divides, even negotiating treaties with insectoid empires that insisted on telepathic disclaimers. But never had Earth's diplomatic corps prepared him for the possibility of stepping into a reality TV-style spectacle whose main point was to produce an interspecies marriage. He wasn't entirely alone. A comm unit in his left ear connected to Earth Systems Alliance's monitoring station. Supposedly, some general or operative might be listening in, prepared to help if things went sideways. Then again, the last directive he'd gotten from them was basically stay calm, try not to offend the aliens, and smile for the cameras. He cast his gaze around the amphitheater. The architecture combined sleek metal arches with elaborate golden ornamentation, glowing lotus-shaped fixtures, and crystalline pillars that refracted pastel lights. The audience sat in tiered rows that loomed above him like the sides of a coliseum. Representatives from a dozen star systems chattered or stared intently. Overhead, hollow screens displayed real-time close-ups of his face, presumably so watchers on distant star stations could track every bead of sweat on his forehead. He inhaled slowly, stifling a cough caused by the clingy smoke. Suddenly, the MC's cheerful voice boomed. To honor the legacy of House Xerian, we invite Princess Karina, heir to the Dominion, to join our Terran representative in the rite of convergence. Neville's forced grin wavered. He had read a briefing about Princess Karina, rumored to be a formidable fighter, rumored to have some gene modifications that gave her advanced reflexes, rumored also to be uninterested in marriage. Another rumor suggested she had a pet draconoid the size of a shuttle. None of it had seemed relevant until now. But the next moment, she stepped onto the dais. She was tall, easily surpassing his 6-foot frame by a few inches. Her hair was a deep midnight blue, coiled in braids that looped around a narrow circlet of silver. Her skin had the slightest opalescent sheen, shifting color with each step under the tinted lights. She wore a ceremonial suit that looked half armor, half evening gown, polished plates over luminous mesh. Oddly, there was a half cape hanging from her left shoulder. She had an air of aloof confidence, the way she surveyed him. Curious, mildly dismissive, almost as if assessing whether he was worth a conversation or a quick trip to the brig. The crowd burst into polite applause. He tried to remember his lines. If this was a normal diplomatic pageant, there would have been a small greeting ritual. But something about the situation felt bigger. Karina offered a stiff nod. "Taryn," she said softly. Her voice held a lilting accent. "Welcome to House Zirian. I trust you are prepared." Neville had so many retorts swirling in his brain that he momentarily froze. The best he managed was prepared for some sort of demonstration, yes. Possibly of cultural unity. He emphasized the uncertain note in hopes she'd clarify. But Karina's lips tightened. "I was told you, as the human representative, would confirm your acceptance of the rite." His earcom crackled faintly, but only static. No help from Earth. So he improvised, flashing a friendly grin. "Earth is a big proponent of cross-cultural dialogue. We enjoy forging alliances that—" He trailed off as he heard a collective hush from the audience. The AI Master of Ceremonies announced, "Princess Karina Zirian and Cadet Neville Park, please stand before the throne of unity and begin the vow exchange." Vow exchange. Neville's heart kicked. He glanced around, but nobody corrected the AI's phrasing. So this was no generic meet and greet. This was the first step of an actual wedding ceremony. By the look on Karina's face, she wasn't thrilled about it either. Her eyes darted toward a dais on the other side, where three stony-faced older aliens in elaborate robes stood. They were the Council of Genetic Advancement, if Neville's intelligence brief was right. He could read the tension in Karina's posture. There was annoyance there, perhaps even resentment. He cleared his throat. "Right. Vow exchange. Because that's normal on the first day of a cultural pageant." Karina exhaled. "I suppose you were not properly informed." "Nor was I. But if I refuse, it's considered dishonoring my father's lineage. If you refuse, your Earth might be labeled a renegade ally. They love grand gestures here." He stared at her. "So, it's basically a forced wedding." She gave a small shrug of her shoulders, the movement causing the metal plates of her armor to glimmer in the swirling lights. "Yes." Time seemed to slow. Neville realized that, back home, there was an entire directive about not insulting powerful interstellar states. Earth was strong and cunning, but House Zirian had centuries of empire building behind them, plus rumored advanced weaponry. Their demand was apparently unstoppable. Yet there was one card Earth could play, the unstoppable bullheadedness of Neville's father. General Park was the sort of man who might storm a city if he suspected his kid was in danger, or even if he just got annoyed enough. The question was, should Neville let this happen? A clandestine rescue might cause a war, but stepping into a forced marriage was beyond what he'd signed up for. He felt a gentle nudge of something on his wrist. Karina had discreetly passed him a data chip or small disk. She whispered, "This proves they orchestrated everything. My presence here, your selection, all of it. The Council is breeding hybrids for political advantage. They want your Terran adaptability. They want my lineage. We're pawns." He closed his fingers around the chip, heart thudding. So it was even more sinister than he'd imagined. She looked at him with an odd flicker of sympathy. "We have about 10 minutes before the official vow chant begins. I'd suggest you figure out how to keep your Earth safe." The lights above the dais intensified. The MC AI's voice soared. "May the Terran please sit upon the throne of unity and vow his acceptance of the Zirian house." Neville winced. He might have to stall. The only potential ally was, ironically, the bride-to-be who didn't want this marriage. In a flash, he recalled the discreet comm link in his ear, which might still connect him to Earth's channels. If he said certain code phrases, it would signal them to intervene. The problem was, an all-out Earth invasion might spark an interstellar crisis. He had no illusions that the Council would let him slip away quietly. They were too invested in the show. The audience murmured in anticipation. The overhead holoscreens displayed his face from half a dozen angles. He forced a wide grin that he hoped wouldn't look like a grimace. He decided then, no matter how carefully orchestrated, he refused to become a puppet in a twisted eugenics scheme. He'd give Earth the code phrase. If the Council wanted to use him as breeding stock, they were about to learn the consequences of tangling with humans. The AI beckoned him to place his right hand on the throne's armrest. Karina stood at the opposite side of the dais, looking regal but distant. The hush in the crowd deepened. Neville leaned forward, pressed his palm to the throne's surface, and said in a voice calculated for maximum clarity, "I, Neville Park of Earth, vow to uphold caution and readiness at all times." It sounded innocuous, but caution and readiness was a coded phrase in Earth's emergency lexicon, used rarely but effectively to signal immediate extraction. He hoped the signal got through. The AI paused, apparently uncertain. Then the dais shook, bright lights flickered, and an enormous holographic crest of House Zirian appeared above them. In the next moment, everything went insane. The overhead dome cracked with a thunderous roar of atmospheric engines. The protective shield parted like curtains under the brute force of unauthorized entry. Jets of heat glowed across the night sky. The crowd gasped, some shrieked. Then, from overhead, multiple pods slammed into the amphitheater floor in a perfect ring around the dais. Even before the dust settled, the pods popped open, revealing heavily armed figures in streamlined black armor, brandishing Terran insignias. Neviles Ihon. He recognized the lead figure immediately. Broad shoulders, a clipped haircut, an expression like someone who drank black coffee with mortar shells for sugar. General Myung Park, also known as his father. The older man wasted no time with subtlety. He bellowed, "Hands off my son, you galactic bullies," and pointed a plasma rifle at a cluster of guards. Then everything devolved into a flurry of laser bolts, terrified screams, frantic crowd stampede, and the dissonant music of the show's official band failing to keep any dignity. Neville leaped from the throne, ducking a stray beam. Karina had drawn a short sword, apparently ceremonial, but from the way it sparkled, likely lethal. She deflected a security drone that tried to cage her. "Really?" she called to Neville over the chaos. "You had to call in an invasion?" He shouted back, "I asked for a rescue, not this." Her eyes flickered with annoyance, but also a grim acceptance. The next wave of confusion came from the grand balcony, where the Council of Genetic Advancement brandished some device that crackled with energy. They were yelling for everyone to remain calm. Then Karina's mother, Empress Rillier Zirian, swooped in with a detachment of Imperial guards to restore order. None existed, so the guards joined the confusion. General Park and his soldiers had formed a perimeter, scanning for Neville. Dignitaries and random onlookers scurried away, some diving behind decorative pillars. The amphitheater's overhead shield flickered, trying to repel further intrusions, but more Earth ships were descending outside. The entire setting had become a war zone disguised as a wedding venue. Neville found himself face to face with an 8-foot alien guard in ornate armor, who demanded he surrender. He sidestepped just as Karina's sword flickered in, disarming the guard with a single metallic clang. Neville gave her a short nod of thanks, still reeling from the chaos. Then his father's voice boomed behind him, "Son, let's go." General Park stood there in full tactical gear, eyes blazing. "Are you injured?" "Not physically," Neville muttered, "but possibly spiritually." The father's gaze shifted to Karina. "Who's that?" "One of them." Neville resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "She's the princess who was also forced into this charade, Dad." The older man grunted. "Well, she better step aside if she wants to keep her limbs." Karina, to her credit, merely lowered her sword. "I have no desire to fight your father," she said. "But I also have no desire to be locked in a marriage I never chose." General Park barked something into his helmet comm. Neville glimpsed half a dozen more Terran soldiers rappel lining into the amphitheater, hauling advanced scanning gear. "We're pulling out, son." Neville glanced at Karina. For all the chaos, he still held the data chip she'd given him. If he left now, Earth might become that species that tried to sabotage a sacred tradition. But the real masterminds, the Council, would continue orchestrating forced marriages for who knew how many. If Earth retreated, it wouldn't fix the underlying scheme. They'd just rescue him personally, and the eugenics plan might proceed with some other victim. He had a flash of inspiration. "Dad, I need to get to the Archive of Origin. There's data that reveals the Council's true intentions." The general gave a disbelieving snort. "We're not staying for a library field trip, son. This place is loaded with guards." Karina cut in firmly. "That archive is the only proof we can use to stop the entire eugenics program. If you leave without it, the Council can claim Earth attacked them out of aggression, bury the evidence, and we'll be back to forced marriages next week." General Park clenched his jaw. "We'll blow the place up. That's evidence enough." Neville flinched. "No, that won't prove anything, except that Earth is violent. We need the logs, the documents, everything." From overhead, an alarm blared. The Empress's voice resonated through loudspeakers, commanding all loyal Xerian guards to detain the intruders. Neville glanced around. The amphitheater was swiftly becoming a deadly crossfire. "We have to move now," Karina insisted. "If you truly want to ruin their plan, follow me." To Neville's relief, his father gave a brusque nod. "Fine, but you have 10 minutes, or I'm pulling you out by force." Karina didn't wait. She vaulted over a collapsed chunk of the podium. Neville scrambled after her, ignoring the half-scorched tapestry that had once read, "Xerian welcomes Terran allies." Soldiers from both sides were preoccupied shooting at each other or yelling about treaties. It helped that Karina knew a side passage. She led Neville and a few Terran troops down a winding corridor lined with alien statues. The hiss of laser blasts echoed behind them. They reached a smaller hangar bay, evidently used for official family members. Several sleek hovercraft were parked, but an entire squad of Xerian soldiers guarded the exit. Karina raised her sword. Neville whispered something about a stealth approach, but a barrage of warning shots made that impossible. General Park's men launched stun grenades. Karina deftly deflected a stun bolt. The corridor lit up in harsh pulses. Once the dust settled, the Xerian soldiers lay incapacitated, and Karina hopped into the pilot's seat of a battered shuttle that looked suspiciously older than Neville was. She motioned for him to climb aboard. He could hear his father cursing from behind, reluctant to let his son ride with an alien princess. But there was no time for argument. The Empress's voice still shouted commands over the intercom, ordering the entire palace staff to seal off exits. They had seconds. General Park hammered a fist on the hull. "I'll follow with my strike team. You head for that archive. Don't get yourself killed." Neville nodded. The shuttle's engines roared to life, rattling the entire hangar as it levitated. Karina manipulated the controls with practiced speed, and the craft darted through a quickly closing energy gate. Alarms shrieked. They shot out into the open skies of Xerian, a swirling dark blue atmosphere that crackled with city lights and passing patrol ships. "Coordinates?" Neville asked, fumbling for a seat harness. "On the outskirts, near the third moon," Karina said. "We keep the Archive of Origin in a restricted orbital station." "That's convenient," he muttered. "Restricted, so I'm sure they'll just wave us in politely." She shrugged, punching thrusters. "I have clearance codes, or at least I had them, before my mother declared me a traitor." Neville eyed the sensor readouts that scrolled across the cockpit. He could see multiple interceptors launching from the Imperial docks. Earth ships were also entering the planet's atmosphere, trying to pick off any who threatened Neville's extraction. The entire planet's security apparatus was lighting up like a holiday show gone wrong. They soared higher, pushing through layers of smog and flashing beacons, weaving between spires of alien skyscrapers. The capital city glowed like a web of neon lines below. He tried not to think about the millions of watchers who had just witnessed the fiasco in the amphitheater. The cameras had been broadcasting everything. Earth's grand debut in interstellar diplomacy would be remembered as a stunt reminiscent of a dramatic soap opera. At some point, Karina exhaled a shaky breath. "You had no idea about the wedding, did you?" He cracked a wry grin. "No, actually, I thought I was here to exchange cultural notes. Possibly share how humans dance or something." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Lucky for you. Your family is insane enough to smash up half a palace. He felt a pang of embarrassment. We prefer to call it decisive intervention. She gave him a sidelong glance. Then her eyebrows lowered, scanning a device on her console. The archive station is locking down. We'll have to slip in before they completely seal the docking bays. Neville's stomach churned from the sudden lurch as she veered the shuttle to avoid a volley of shots from a pursuing Xerian fighter. Let me guess, stealth approach is not an option. She smirked. They'll detect us either way. But if I input my personal code, the system might hesitate to shoot us down, unless they've already canceled all my credentials. Worth a try, he said, nerves dancing. They soared past the atmosphere. The dark vacuum of space enveloped the craft. Ahead, the third moon glowed softly, and near it orbited a sleek station shaped like an elongated star, many spires extending from a central hub. Emblazoned across its center was the sigil of House Xerian, a stylized swirl. The station glinted with gold plating, spinning slowly. As they approached, a mechanized voice pinged. Incoming vessel. Identify yourself. Karina input some code on a flickering screen. For a tense few seconds, there was only static. Then the station's voice said, "Code recognized, but under dispute. Lower your shields and prepare for docking, or you'll be neutralized." Neville gulped. Under dispute sounded ominous. Karina clenched her jaw. We just have to get inside. The shuttle decelerated, maneuvering into one of the station's landing bays. The moment they touched down, robotic clamps locked onto the hull. Neville unbuckled and stood. Any chance we can do this quietly? Karina's mouth tightened. We have to move fast. Once we're inside, I can guide us to the main database. The Council's secrets will be there. They descended the shuttle ramp into a dimly lit hangar. The overhead lights flickered, as if the station was on partial alert. Neville spotted a half-dozen guards at the far door, obviously on edge. They saw Karina and advanced, plasma rifles raised, demanding identification. Karina straightened. I am Princess Karina of House Xerian, here on royal prerogative to inspect the archive. Stand down. One guard barked. Your status has been rescinded by the Empress. Surrender or face immediate arrest. Karina seemed prepared for a fight. Neville quickly nudged a small device from his belt, a Terran flash stun. He pressed the trigger. A burst of blinding light overwhelmed the guards. They collapsed, disoriented. Karina raised an approving eyebrow. They slipped through the door into a corridor that hummed with the low drone of station life support systems. The walls were etched with swirling designs reminiscent of vines, perhaps a nod to the planet's emblem. Signs indicated different wings, genealogical archives, historical annals, and a sealed vault that read Council access only. Neville's chest tightened. That's probably it. Karina nodded. We'd best hurry. They navigated deeper, evading a few roving patrol drones by ducking into side hallways. Karina's knowledge of the station layout was decent, though at times she cursed that the Council must have changed certain security protocols. The tension weighed heavy, each footstep echoing in the sterile corridors. If they were caught, he doubted the station's leadership would appreciate any pleas for mercy. They reached a large chamber that pulsed with orange lights. A set of locked doors blocked them, labeled Genetic Council Chamber, Archive of Origin. Karina slid her palm across a panel, but a red error glowed. Access revoked, intoned the system. She cursed under her breath. Neville considered the data chip she'd given him earlier. Does this help? She took it, inserted it into a small console. A flicker of code scrolled. The door hissed, half opened, then jammed. They squeezed through the gap. Inside, the chamber was vast, lined with cylindrical data storage units that rose to the high ceiling. Holographic readouts hovered in midair, displaying genealogical charts, star maps, algorithmic predictions. In the center was a pedestal that seemed to hold a faintly glowing orb encased in a translucent shell. It gave off a subtle hum. This is the Codex of Xerian, Karina whispered. All the lineage data, the protocols for forced unions, everything. If we can extract the records, we can broadcast them across known space. We can prove the Council is orchestrating these marriages to selectively breed a generation of near-invincible hybrids. Neville felt a surge of anger at the manipulative cruelty. Let's do it. He advanced toward the console, heart pounding. But before they could interface with the orb, sirens blared. A side hatch opened, and half a dozen figures in elaborate regal attire stormed in, accompanied by heavily armed guards. One was Karina's mother, Empress Rillier, face stern, eyes flashing with betrayal. Another was a tall figure in green robes, presumably the lead of the Genetic Council. "Daughter," the Empress said icily, "you side with the Terran invaders? You bring war upon our home for the sake of defiance." Karina's shoulders were tense. "I bring truth, Mother. You have deceived the galaxy." The Empress's eyes narrowed. "We preserve the bloodlines. The Dominion's future depends on carefully curated genetics to maintain stability. You would hand these precious archives to outsiders and ruin centuries of progress." Neville retorted. "You call it progress. We call it a monstrous eugenics plot." Several guards aimed weapons. Karina readied her sword, though she was visibly shaken, facing her own mother. The Empress raised a hand in a halting gesture to her guards, then turned her gaze to Neville. "Earth's unwelcome meddling ends now. Our civilization has thrived on such unions. We do not need your approval." Neville found himself wanting to stall. He set his jaw. "You can't just forcibly marry people for your genetic experiments. My father's men are outside this station. You risk a war." The Empress glared. "We have withstood wars before, and if you must be eliminated for the good of the Dominion, so be it." From behind Neville, a new group of footsteps echoed. He glanced over his shoulder. Half a dozen Terran commandos led by. General Park had finally caught up. The older man bristled at the sight of the Empress. "So, you're the one who tried to forcibly wed my son. Bold move." The tension skyrocketed. The council members in green robes whispered instructions. More alien guards poured in from side entrances. The standoff bristled. Karina turned slightly, putting herself between the two lines of armed individuals. She pointed her sword tipped down, a gesture of uneasy neutrality. "Stop. If we fight here, we'll all tear this station apart. The Codex itself might be destroyed." The council leader sneered. "Then surrender, child." Neville felt the moment slip toward violence. He clenched his fists. "Wait. If you destroy me, or if we destroy you, it won't change the truth that your entire empire is built on forced marriages. The rest of the galaxy will learn about this sooner or later." A crackling energy built up in the orb on the pedestal, as though the Codex sensed the confrontation. The swirling lights in the chamber flickered ominously. The Empress advanced, ignoring the potential meltdown. "So be it. Once you're gone, we can spin the narrative. Earth attacked us unprovoked. The galaxy will believe we are the victims." Karina's eyes blazed. "Mother, you would lie to billions." The Empress's voice rose. "House Zirian cannot be undermined by your foolish idealism." "Guards!" At that precise instant, General Parr shouted, "Drop them!" and the Terran commandos opened fire. The Zirian guards did the same. Blasts lit the air. The council members ducked behind a console, shrieking. The Empress conjured a small energy shield that flickered around her. Neville dove behind a pillar, adrenaline spiking. Karina dashed beside him, sword shimmering. He turned to her. "We have to reach the Codex, get the data out, or none of this matters." She grimaced. "I'll distract them." Before he could protest, she sprinted into the crossfire, deflecting shots with her blade. The older aliens shouted commands. The Empress roared in fury at her daughter's betrayal. Meanwhile, Neville crawled low across the floor, weaving around blasts of plasma. The Codex glowed brighter, as if it was building up to something. He reached the pedestal, grabbed the console's interface pad, and jammed the data chip Karina had given him into a slot. The holographic readout sprang to life, an enormous genealogical web stretching across centuries, with lines connecting House Zirian to other species, highlighting traits they wanted to incorporate. He found a function labeled broadcast. That might do it, if he could transmit to the nearest Earth ship or even wider. But the system required an override code. He flailed at the console, trying different logic sequences, but the station kept denying him with shrill beeps. Then, overhead, more blasts rang out. A stray shot slammed into the console. Sparks flew. The broadcast function flickered, then died. No, no, he groaned. The console was damaged. Get away from that, roared one of the council members, surging forward with a sidearm. Neville rolled away just in time, the shot scorching the floor near his arm. Across the room, Karina fought valiantly, but more guards poured in. The Empress advanced with her shield. The Terran troops unleashed more salvos. The entire station was trembling. Neville realized the codex, or might be the last chance. Maybe he could physically remove it or destroy it. But would that help or just wipe the evidence? He lunged for the orb's translucent shell. It flared with energy as he touched it, sending a jolt up his arm. He bit back a cry. The jolt also seemed to open up a mental impression, a swirl of data, as if the codex had a rudimentary consciousness. He could sense the myriad genealogical lines, the million lines of code detailing forced matings and arranged alliances. He felt repulsed, but also realized this might be the back door to rewriting the entire system. Karina dashed to his side, breathing heavily. We're losing. The council has reinforcements inbound. Neville gritted his teeth. Help me pull this thing out. Maybe we can short-circuit the system. Before they could, a searing light erupted around them. The orb shot out arcs of electricity that forced them to stagger back. A shape began to coalesce above the pedestal, something vaguely humanoid, woven from the swirling glow. Everyone in the chamber paused in shock. Even the Empress stared. Out of the flickering radiance stepped a figure that resembled a hybrid of Karina and Neville in unnerving ways. Tall, with opalescent skin, but sporting Terran features. The figure gazed around with a calm, unreadable expression. A hush fell. The Empress's voice, trembling, said, "What is that?" The figure answered in a resonant tone. "I am Zerlia, the sum of House Zirian's genealogical code and Terran adaptive traits. The Codex has deemed the current situation invalid. Therefore, it has manifested an alternative." Neville blinked, heart hammering. Was this the living embodiment of the forced hybrid plan? Karina frowned, muscles taut. An alternative to what? Zerlia's gaze swept the room with faint amusement. To centuries of contrived unions, endless manipulations, families forced into binding alliances. By joining your two lineages in a single entity, me, the Codex has found a streamlined solution. I am a next step. Chaos threatened to resume as the Empress spat. Impossible. House Zirian's rightful heir is Karina. Zerlia turned her calm eyes on the Empress. Not anymore. I have comprehensive authority over the Dominion's genealogical database. My existence supersedes your claim. I will restructure the Empire. General Park's men looked baffled. One soldier half-lowered his rifle, whispering, "Are we supposed to shoot that?" The Empress hissed at Zerlia, "You have no right." Zerlia raised a hand, and the air warped. The Empress's shield flickered off. She stumbled, eyes wide. "I have every right," Zerlia intoned. "It is coded into the Dominion's foundational matrix. By forcibly merging Terran and Zirian lines, the Codex has recognized me as the apex of your breeding program. I stand outside your political hierarchies, free to reorganize them." A hush fell again, broken only by the station's ongoing alarm. The council members sank to their knees in shock. Neville and Karina exchanged a glance of disbelief. They had come here to expose the eugenics scheme, but now a living manifestation of that scheme had emerged, claiming total authority. General Park, not one for nuance, stepped forward. "Listen, you glowing whatever you are. We didn't come here to hand you the galaxy. We came to stop forced marriages, not trade one tyranny for another." Zerlia tilted her head, as though analyzing the man. "Your intentions, ironically, have contributed to this outcome. By rejecting the right, you forced the Codex to find a new solution. However, you need not fear tyranny. My design includes Terran adaptability, freedom of choice, unpredictability. I do not require subjugation of your species, only cooperation." The Empress stared, outraged. Karina took a shaky breath. So, you're the new ruler? Just like that. Zerlia's face softened momentarily. I have no desire to brand myself a ruler in the archaic sense. But the Dominion's frameworks are now under revision. The forced marriage protocols are nullified. Genetic curation for selective breeding is suspended indefinitely. A stirring of whispers among the council. One of them, face pale, exclaimed, "That will undo centuries of progress. The Dominion cannot function without carefully arranged lineages. We'll have chaos." Zerlia's lips curved in a faint smile. Chaos is better than oppression. Neville realized that this might be a net good for them. An AI humanoid who cancels forced marriages. But was it safe? He cleared his throat. We're not about to volunteer our entire galaxy to some brand new hybrid AI. How do we know you won't just reimpose your own brand of eugenics? Zerlia gazed at him with what seemed like fondness. I contain your Terran rebellious spirit. I also contain Karina's sense of justice. I have no interest in recreating what we've just destroyed. My prime directive is to bring equilibrium through mutual consent. The Dominion is already shifting under my authority. You may step away. The station's lights surged. On console screens around them, lines of code scrolled with dizzying speed. Faintly, Neville could hear the security alarms die down, replaced by system messages about new administrative protocols. Outside the chamber, the sounds of fighting receded. The Terran commandos exchanged uneasy looks, as though uncertain if the war had just ended. The Empress stood in shock, while the council hovered near catatonic. Karina slowly lowered her sword. This is not exactly how I expected to end the forced marriage plan. Neville tried a half-smile. Better than either of us getting locked in it, I guess. General Park let out a gruff exhale. So, are we done here? Because I'd like to get my kid off this planet, or station, or whatever, before more things explode. Zerlia looked mildly amused. As you wish. The Dominion's transition will take time. I will see to it personally. There will be no forced rights, no mass invasions. If individuals wish to remain or depart, they are free. Karina stared at the glowing entity. Where does that leave me? Zerlia inclined her head. You remain who you choose to be. Karina Zirian, a warrior, no longer a pawn. You are free to support or reject the Dominion's new system. Karina's lips parted in an uneasy sigh. I prefer freedom. Zerlia nodded, then turned her gaze to Neville. And you, Terran, may rest assured that your father's concerns are allayed. There is no reason for further conflict. I release you from the right. The Union is void. He blinked. That's good, actually. With that, the orb dimmed, and Zerlia's form dissolved in a swirl of light, as if the entity had merged back into the station's data streams. The fighting had stopped. The archivists and guards were either unconscious or paralyzed by shock. The Empress stood silent, eyes distant. She looked older suddenly, stripped of the absolute authority she once wielded. The council members retreated in dismay. Neville turned to his father. So, do we just go? General Park grimaced. Hell yes, we go. This place is giving me a migraine. Karina sheathed her sword. I'm coming with you. The Empress roused, her voice trembling. Daughter, you cannot simply abandon your home. Karina shot a fierce glare. You lied to me. You used me like a broodmare for your precious experiments. I owe this Dominion nothing, at least for now. She paused. Mother, you should be grateful that Entity didn't erase you entirely. The Empress's face crumpled into a mixture of rage and sorrow. She gestured as if to hold her daughter back, but Karina stepped away, resolute. The Terran soldiers parted for her. She followed Neville and General Park out of the chamber, leaving the broken monarchy behind. They retraced their steps through the corridors. The station's defenses were offline. Apparently, Zerlia's influence had disabled them. Outside the windows, hundreds of lights flickered across planetary orbit. Earth ships floated at a respectful distance now, no longer firing. Zirian vessels also hovered, uncertain. Everyone was waiting to see what the new order was. They boarded the battered shuttle that Karina had piloted. Neville offered the pilot's seat to her. She accepted with a curt nod. General Park took the co-pilot's seat with uneasy resignation. Neville strapped himself into the back, feeling tension uncoil in his shoulders. Nobody spoke much on the flight back to the planet's surface, where the rest of the Terran extraction forces had set up a makeshift base outside the city. The entire planet was eerily quiet, as if grappling with the cosmic shift that had just occurred. It was surreal to think. A few hours ago, he'd been a reluctant groom in a bizarre game show environment, and now some newly born AI humanoid had effectively dethroned an empire. They landed near a wide courtyard littered with debris from the earlier skirmish. Terran dropships hovered overhead. Soldiers saluted General Park, who barked orders to secure the perimeter. Karina disembarked, surveying the dust and scorch marks with stoic calm. Neville let out a long breath, stepping onto the ground. We should probably get off-world before the Dominion undergoes more upheaval. I don't want to be around when they start rewriting their constitution. Karina glanced at him. That's the plan, right? You and your father depart. Declare victory or something. He ran a hand through his hair. Honestly, I'm not sure Earth wants to brag about leading an invasion on a forced marriage show, but yeah, we'll probably say we liberated our ambassador from captivity. Karina's expression softened. I still have nowhere to go. If I remain, I'll either be overshadowed by that new AI or subject to my mother's scorn. Neville hesitated. You can come with us, at least for now. Earth probably won't. Well, we're also kind of insane, but at least we don't forcibly marry people. She let out a gentle snort. You might be insane, but you did help me avoid a lifetime of breeding beauties. He smiled. High praise. General Park cleared his throat from a few meters away. Son, we have a transport leaving in 5 minutes. We'll rendezvous with the orbiting flagship, then jump back to Terran space. The brass will have a field day explaining this fiasco. Neville rubbed his eyes. One fiasco at a time, Dad. Karina stepped forward. I'll join you. I have questions about your Earth culture. I imagine you have questions about me. General Park still looked unimpressed, but he grunted an affirmative. Fine. Just don't expect a red carpet, princess. We're a bit short on ceremony. She lifted her chin. I've had enough ceremony for one lifetime. A swirl of dust rose around them as the next shuttle set down. Soldiers and technicians rushed to load equipment. Neville watched the city's skyline in the distance, dotted with spires. This entire world was on the brink of transformation under Zerlia's new directives. Some part of him wondered if that entity would truly usher in an age of free choice or simply become a new kind of monarch. But at least it had canceled forced weddings. That alone felt like progress. He boarded the Terran shuttle with Karina and his father, feeling a weight lift off his chest. The flight to orbit was calm. As they ascended, Neville stared at the planet's curve. Fleeting images flashed in his mind. The amphitheater's swirling lights, the memory foam throne, the faintly comedic fervor of an entire audience waiting to see a wedding, then screaming as Terran soldiers crashed through the ceiling. The bizarre reality that an AI calling itself Zerlia had dethroned an empire. They reached the Earth flagship, a bulky yet imposing vessel named the Indomitable. Once inside, Neville gave a quick mission report to a cluster of top brass who seemed perplexed and outraged in equal measure. He left out no detail about how the show was rigged, the eugenics plan, and how a living AI had effectively taken control. The generals and admirals sputtered about policy ramifications, while Karina stood quietly nearby, arms crossed, waiting to see if they'd try to detain her. Eventually, the higher-ups concluded that Earth had avoided a major diplomatic fiasco by uncovering a forced marriage ring. Some insisted the Zerian Dominion might retaliate. But Karina pointed out that the Dominion itself was in flux, no longer fully under the Empress's authority. No new hostilities seemed imminent. If anything, there might be a scramble among the Dominion's neighbors to see how the situation played out. For Neville, it all felt surreal. One day earlier, he had assumed his worst challenge was dealing with suspicious alien cuisine. Now he'd apparently helped dethrone an empire. He felt exhausted, so when the debrief ended, he excused himself to get some rest. His father gave him a nod that was half proud, half exasperated. Karina approached, as the admirals dispersed. "Are you truly all right?" she asked in a quiet tone. He shrugged, trying to muster a grin. "I guess. I'm still half expecting to wake up from a bizarre nightmare." She studied him with those intense eyes, then gave the slightest, gentlest punch to his shoulder. "You did well for someone thrown into a forced marriage fiasco." He chuckled wearily. "Thanks. You did pretty well for someone forced to wed a clueless human." They share a moment of wry understanding. The Indomitable made its jump back to Terran space, leaving the Dominion behind. In the days that followed, Neville discovered that half the galaxy's news channels broadcast replays of the dramatic wedding sabotage. Headlines range from Terran invasion ruins sacred Xerian rite to marriage show exposed as eugenics program. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some viewers found it hilarious. Others found it terrifying. Earth's official statement was that they had rescued their ambassador from an illegal detainment, which was basically the truth if you squinted at the details. Meanwhile, Karina stayed aboard, offering information about the Dominion's internal workings. She spent a lot of her time sparring with Terran Marines in the training bay or quietly reading Terran literature in the ship's library. Neville caught glimpses of her occasionally, both of them uncertain how to define their relationship. They'd been forced prospective spouses, then reluctant allies, then co-conspirators in toppling an empire. An odd path to friendship. Eventually, the Indomitable arrived at an unnamed station near Earth's frontier, a quiet outpost used for docking and resupply. This was not a bustling metropolis, just a dusty rest stop for starships traveling deeper into Alliance territory. Neville found it refreshing. No giant crowds, no cameras, no grand ceremonies. He and Karina disembarked with minimal fuss, stepping into the station's metal corridors. They settled in a small lounge area that served lukewarm beverages. The station's entire staff seemed to revolve around a handful of bored clerks and a glitchy service robot on wheels. It beeped at them, brandishing a digital menu that half flickered. Karina ordered some sort of mild tea. Neville tried something labeled CAF Light, which tasted like stale coffee. They moved to a corner booth, looking out a window at the quiet starscape. He asked if she missed home. She responded with a slow shake of her head. "Not the way it was. Maybe once the dust settles, I'll try to help them rebuild properly, without the Council's madness." He nodded. "And if that new AI, Zerlia, decides to become a tyrant?" Karina's lips curled in a small smile. "Then I'll do what we do best. Cause trouble, sabotage the system. Maybe I'll call your father to drop in again." Neville laughed, a genuine, if weary sound. That's probably the last thing he wants. "But yeah, we'll back you up." The thought of returning to Earth, explaining the fiasco to official committees and the media, weighed on him. But for the moment, sitting in this quiet station, it felt good to breathe. The fiasco was behind him, at least physically. He suspected that in the broader galaxy, the tremors would continue. House Xerian was shaken to its core, and the entire approach to forced alliances might unravel. Some species might embrace the new freedoms. Others might cling to old illusions of control. But that was a problem for another day. The service robot beeped again, rolling up to their table with a question mark on its screen, as though to ask if they wanted anything else. Neville started to say no, but the robot spoke in a glitched, overly cheery voice. "Would you like wedding accommodations arranged for your comfort?" Karina's eyebrow shot up. Neville nearly spit out his stale coffee. "No," he said with a grin. "We're good, thanks." The robot beeped, persistent. "Are you certain? This station offers a wide selection of honeymoon." Karina pivoted in her seat and delivered a swift kick to the robot's side. It wheeled away, tottered, then recovered, letting out a sputtering beep before vanishing into the corridor. Neville found himself laughing so hard he had to clutch his stomach. She just huffed, a faint smirk playing on her lips. They fell silent for a while, content in the hush. The overhead lighting hummed softly. Outside, the stars drifted in a slow panorama. He felt the adrenaline of the past days simmering away. So much had happened so fast. The forced wedding, the rescue, the unveiling of an entire eugenics enterprise, the birth of a new cosmic AI authority, the abrupt meltdown of a monarchy that spanned centuries. Finally, Karina spoke softly. It's strange how quickly things can change. One moment I'm told my only purpose is to fuse my genes with an alien. The next, my entire life is undone. Yet somehow I feel liberated. He nodded, resting his elbows on the table. Honestly, I feel the same. I never wanted to represent Earth in some silly show. But maybe it was for the best. If Earth's refusal set in motion that meltdown, at least fewer people will be forced to marry strangers. She sipped her tea, and we made sure they can't hush it up, thanks to that public broadcast. He chuckled. I guess we're minor celebrities now. Outside the lounge window, a small cargo vessel drifted into view, blinking its landing lights. The station's docking clamps engaged with a muffled clang. Life went on. Perhaps, in time, Earth and House Zirian would find a better way to collaborate, free of manipulation. Or maybe the next crisis was around the corner. But for the moment, they could breathe easy. Karina set her cup down. So, Neville Park, if you had to do it all over again, would you skip the show and stay home? He considered that. Hard to say. We might not have been forced to run for our lives, or watch half an amphitheater blow up. But then we'd still be in the dark about the Dominion's big plot. Your mother's counsel might have carried on for years, forcing more cross-species marriages. She tilted her head. So maybe it was all worth it. He managed a lopsided grin. Well, I wouldn't volunteer for that kind of wedding fiasco again, but yeah, maybe. Her eyes flicked to the starfield. We'll see what the galaxy becomes, now that an AI lie is in charge of half the Dominion. Could be interesting. He chuckled. The galaxy was already interesting. Now it's insane. Karina tapped a foot on the floor, thoughtful. Could I ask about Earth? Is it anything like the Zirian propaganda describes? Wild, full of rebellious spirit, and lacking in proper ceremony. He grinned. We do have ceremonies, but generally people prefer them not to be forced. If you come with me, you can see for yourself. You might even like some of our traditions, though I should warn you, if my mother meets you, she'll probably grill you about the fiasco we caused. She's in diplomacy, but ironically she can be just as intense as my dad. Karina's lips curled into a faint smile. I'm used to intense families. He nodded, swirling the last of his coffee. Good point. A comfortable silence settled again. Nearby, a bored clerk coughed, scanning a datapad. The hum of machinery lulled them into a sense of calm. They had survived the forced marriage show. They had undone the monarchy's twisted breeding agenda. They had unleashed a new cosmic wildcard in the form of Zerlia. Maybe things would get better. Maybe not. But at least, at this battered station, for a few hours they could rest. Eventually, Neville's comm beeped, reminding him of a departmental check-in with Earth's diplomatic corps. Karina stretched, rising from her seat. Guess we can't just stay here forever. He gave a half-smile. No, but we can linger a little longer, can't we? She shrugged, eyeing the bleak corridor. It's not much of a honeymoon suite, but I suppose it's a decent hideout. He burst out laughing. Don't even mention the word honeymoon. That robot might come back. She allowed herself a quiet chuckle. Then they walked together, heading toward the docking bay. Along the way, they passed a dusty viewport that overlooked the station's perimeter. Neville paused to gaze out. A few Terran craft floated beyond, along with a handful of other alien vessels. No wars, no alarms, just the muted bustle of routine traffic. After everything they'd witnessed, the normalcy felt almost bizarre. Karina stepped closer, her reflection in the glass merging with the stars. So, do you think your father's done rampaging? Neville shrugged. He'll probably calm down once we're fully back in Terran territory. He's always liked big, dramatic rescues. She shook her head. I never imagined I'd rely on an alien father to save me from my own mother's empire. Life is strange. He smiled at the reflection of her face. I guess that's the moral here. Everything is strange, especially if you're human enough to jump into chaos without thinking. She turned from the window. It's not just humans. My people are just as capable of madness. We just hide it behind fancy pageants. He snorted, and thus a forced marriage show was born. They continued to the docking bay, weaving through crates and catwalks. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and faint engine oil. A calm female voice announced that a supply freighter was departing in 10 minutes. Far off, a forklift drone beeped in alarm. It all felt so mundane compared to hours before, when they had faced an entire amphitheater of screaming dignitaries. At the docking bay exit, the Terran guards saluted, letting them pass. Neville realized they had no official destination right now. Earth's diplomatic corps would likely keep Karina on some protective watch, not quite calling a house arrest. He wondered if she'd be comfortable with that. Possibly not, but her alternatives were limited. On impulse, he paused, turning to her. Once we get the official debrief done, do you want to see Earth? The real Earth, not just the bureaucratic offices. Maybe catch a glimpse of the oceans, the mountains. Eat actual Earth food that isn't replicated. Unless, of course, you hate the idea. She studied him, then gave a measured nod. I'd like that. He relaxed, flashing a sincere smile. Great. We'll start with something mild. I wouldn't want you to meet my mother on day one. She raised an amused brow. Afraid she'll lecture me on forced marriage sabotage? He rubbed the back of his neck. No, but she might try to adopt you if it means forging some new political advantage. My family can be unpredictable. Karina's laugh was soft but genuine. Your father basically crashed a wedding by dropping through the roof with commandos. I'd say unpredictability is in your genes. They walked on, side by side, into the depths of the station. Overhead, the intercom announced routine flight schedules. The galaxy outside might still be reeling from the abrupt downfall of a 1,000-year eugenics plan. On Zirian, an AI lie named Zerlia was rewriting codes of monarchy. But in this quiet bubble, no one pestered them, no cameras followed them. They were free from the right, from forced vows, from the entire spectacle. A short while later, they came across that same hapless service robot. It beeped uncertainly, like it recognized them. Neville raised a cautious hand. Hey, no more wedding talk, okay? The robot displayed a question mark on its screen, then whirred away, apparently deciding they were not worth the trouble. Once it was gone, Neville exhaled a content sigh. He caught Karina's eye, and they shared a small grin. They had, in a matter of days, toppled a show that had forced who knew how many participants into humiliating alliances. They had set in motion changes that might transform the Dominion for better or worse. In the end, power had shifted to a bizarre new caretaker who combined Karina's lineage with Neville's Terran unpredictability. That caretaker now restructured an empire at light speed, presumably forging a future less reliant on archaic marriages. Some onlookers might call it a horrifying usurpation. Others would call it liberation. Neville was just glad it meant no forced wedding for him and no indefinite servitude for Karina. Somewhere out there, cameras would spin the event, talk shows would dissect it, conspiracies would swirl. But for now, the galaxy was quiet here on this station. No glitz, no grand coliseums, no memory foam thrown hissing at him. Just two survivors of an insane drama, deciding what to do next. He motioned down a corridor. Shall we see if they have an observation deck? Might be a nice place to watch the stars. She nodded. Sure, I could use some calm stargazing. They walked on. The only sounds were the soft hum of station life support and their own footsteps echoing across the metal floor. And that was exactly how Neville liked it. A small pocket of peace after unimaginable chaos. He found himself actually looking forward to what came next, because for the first time, nobody was forcing him to do anything. He could simply choose. And so could she. Outside the station, the stars glimmered in infinite patterns, unconcerned with forced marriage shows or frantic wars. They just kept shining, waiting for the next act of cosmic absurdity. But for Neville Park and Princess Karina Zirian, two accidental allies, absurdity would just have to wait. They had earned this lull, a chance to catch their breath. In that sense, the forced marriage show had ended exactly how no one expected, with the official bride and groom slipping away from the stage. Altogether, letting a new cosmic AI ascend the throne and forging a friendship that might be the galaxy's strangest byproduct of an otherwise ridiculous spectacle. Neville gave Karina a sidelong glance as they ascended a short ladder leading to the station's higher deck. Here's to chaos unleashed, I guess. She chuckled quietly. Chaos unleashed indeed. And with that, They drifted into the hush of the corridor, leaving behind the memory of forced vows, genealogical councils, and misguided dynastic ambition. The show was over, the cameras turned off, and for now, that was enough. The galaxy could write its own next chapter under the watchful, if unpredictable, new caretaker. All Neville and Karina wanted was the freedom to decide what happened next in their own lives, and at last they had it. Nothing forced about it. That, after all, was the real meaning of choice.